Okay, bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone. My name is Yara Sachs. I'm the Member of Parliament here in York Centre, and I will be your host for today's announcements. I would like to acknowledge firstly that I am on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the ancestral lands of the Huron-Wendat. Thank you for joining us today for this exciting announcement coming to you live from across the country. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the Minister of Transport, Omar Alghabra, to start us off from Ontario. Minister Alghabra, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Yara, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I also would like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I'm pleased to be here with you today by my colleagues, Minister Wilkinson, who is in Vancouver, and Minister Guilbeault, who is in Montreal. And today I am in York Centre in North York, Toronto, at the Discovery Center of Plug and Drive, a nonprofit organization committed to accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles. And I want to thank them for all their work and support in making sure that this event happens here today. Creating a green economy was an important priority before the global pandemic began. Bâtir une économie verte reste une priorité. It remains an important priority now as we focus on economic recovery and on building back better. In many ways, economic growth and addressing climate change means innovating and changing the way we do things. Before the global pandemic, our government was working to get more zero-emission vehicles on our streets and highways. We set a target for zero-emission vehicle sales in Canada. We also introduced measures to encourage Canadians to make the switch to clean vehicles. Today, I'm announcing that we are accelerating our zero-emission vehicles goal. By 2035, all new cars and light-duty trucks sold in Canada will be zero-emission vehicles, 100% of them. This is 5 years sooner than our previous goal. And a recent report from the International Energy Agency said that virtually all new light-duty vehicles would need to be zero-emission vehicles by 2035 to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. As was mentioned in our Strengthening Climate Plan, a healthy environment and a healthy economy, we intend to align and harmonize our light-duty emissions regulations with the most ambitious in North America. And if required, we will pursue additional mandatory zero-emission vehicle measures to ensure that we meet our 2035 goal. Canada and the United States both need a strong and unified North American automotive sector that is transitioning to zero-emission vehicles. This is important for both countries' climate change goals. Fighting climate change and limiting environmental impacts from transportation will ensure cleaner air and water for future generations, and it will also create good jobs and opportunities for all Canadians. Zero-emission vehicles are a key part of our plan for a green economy. I want to thank everyone who has already made the switch to a zero-emission vehicle. As we work to reach our target, access to these vehicles will be a major factor. The higher cost of zero-emission vehicles may be an obstacle for many Canadians. That's why the Incentive for Zero-Emission Vehicles program was introduced back in Budget 2019. Since May 2019, our government has invested almost $600 million for the incentives for the Zero-Emission Vehicle program. This has helped more than 90,000 Canadians take this important step, choosing to purchase or lease a zero-emission vehicle. I want to thank automakers who are making significant investments in electrification and those who are producing affordable vehicles that are eligible for the Incentives for Zero-Emission Vehicles program. In the last year alone, GM, Ford, and Stellantis announced major zero-emission vehicle assembly investments in Canada. Canada is also the only G7 country with access to all of the critical minerals required for electric vehicle batteries, and our skilled labor force makes us a key player and reliable partner in the global transition to a green economy. With our strengthened climate plan and the $8 billion in funding through the Net Zero Accelerator, we are also ensuring that we have the policies necessary to attract the electric vehicle and battery supply chains to Canada. This will create good jobs, accelerate the sales of zero-emission vehicles, and contribute to a cleaner environment. Because Canadians' quality of life and Canada's future growth are deeply tied to our environment. We know that we need to invest in a cleaner, more sustainable future. Nous devons investir dans un avenir plus propre. Doing this will help protect the environment, create good jobs, and support our economies. Merci, thank you. And back to you, Yara.
Thank you, Minister Alghabra, for sharing this terrific news with Canadians and sharing wonderful news for the environment. And now I'd like to present the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Jonathan Wilkinson, who would like to say a few words. Over to you, Minister Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Yara. It is certainly a pleasure to be here with you in my role as Minister of Environment and Climate Change for Canada, but also as a British Columbian Member of Parliament. I would like to also acknowledge that I am joining you from North Vancouver, sunny North Vancouver, on the traditional territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Let me also acknowledge that it's just after 9 o'clock in the morning and it's well over 30 degrees here in Vancouver. We in British Columbia shattered the heat records that have existed in this country over the course of the last few days, which I think is a good reminder of what today's announcement is all about. British Columbians are very well aware of the advantages of adopting zero-emission vehicles. In fact, BC leads the country in the market share of zero-emission vehicle sales. We in BC are already experiencing the benefits of zero-emission vehicles, which include cleaner air, less carbon pollution, and quieter streets. Le Canada et plusieurs de ses plus grands partenaires commerciaux, dont les États-Unis, se sont engagés à devenir carbone neutre d'ici 2050. C'est ce qu'il faut faire pour éviter les pires effets du changement climatique et exploiter les potentiels économiques derrière cet objectif. Le Canada est résolu à réduire ses émissions de 40 à 45% sous le niveau de 2005 d'ici 2030. C'est exactement ce que la science et les modèles économiques nous disent de faire. Today in the Senate of Canada, senators are doing what I hope will be a final deliberation on Bill C-12, the first federal legislation that sets legal requirements on the current government and future governments to methodically plan, to report, and to course correct on our way to net zero emissions by 2050. Transportation accounts for about a quarter of Canada's emissions. We simply must reduce our transportation emissions, and really there is no time to lose. The math is pretty simple. Cars last around 15 years, so we need 100% of new vehicles sold to be ZEVs by 2035 if we are going to achieve our net zero emission goal by 2050. La bonne nouvelle, c'est que nous avons la technologie pour le faire. Et elle se trouve dans la région de Vancouver et un peu partout au Canada. Et le monde entier suit notre exemple. Norway will sell nothing but zero-emission vehicles by 2025. Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, Iceland, Slovenia, Israel, and Ireland all say they will get there by 2030. The United Kingdom and Japan have 2035 targets. To the south of us, California, which is the fifth largest economy in the world, has committed to 100% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2035. Aujourd'hui, je suis très heureux de pouvoir dire que le Canada continuera de montrer la voie à suivre au pays. To achieve the mandatory target of 100% light-duty vehicle sales being zero-emission vehicles by 2035, we will work with the United States on fuel efficiency, greenhouse gas emission standards to drive ZEV deployment and we will consult domestically on how best we can achieve this 2035 target by enacting further regulatory measures that work for Canada and for Canadian workers. We will also continue to make significant investments in building out refueling infrastructure from coast to coast to coast. Nous savons que ce sera une bonne chose pour notre environnement. C'est également essentiel de le faire pour la prospérité économique de notre pays. Canada's Strengthened Climate Plan, A Healthy Environment and a Healthy Economy, is about setting us up for economic success in a low-carbon world. The zero-emission vehicle economy is a textbook example of how Canada can compete, create well-paying, sustainable jobs, and win in the global race that's already well underway. We have the skilled labor force, an established auto manufacturing sector. We are the only nation in the Western Hemisphere with deposits of cobalt, graphite, lithium, and nickel, the minerals needed to make next-generation electric batteries. All of the 5 major auto manufacturers in Canada have committed to significant global zero-emission vehicle production over the next 5 years. And our government's Net Zero Accelerator program is already helping our car makers retool in Canada for the next generation of automotive expansion. This includes the investment of $295 million in the Ford Motor Company of Canada's $1.8 billion project to build electric vehicles at its Oakville Assembly Complex. La transition vers des véhicules zéro émission sera également une bonne chose pour les consommateurs. Just last week, Minister McKenna and I announced 280 zero-emission school buses that will be deployed in BC with financing help from the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. The reason that deal works is because of the major lifetime operating savings offered by zero-emission vehicles from lower fuel and maintenance costs. And as the sales and production of zero-emission personal vehicles scale up, upfront prices will continue to fall. Entre-temps, nous aidons les consommateurs à se procurer un véhicule électrique en leur offrant $5 000 à l'achat. Ce montant combiné au programme en place dans certaines provinces fait en sorte que le prix des véhicules zéro émission est très concurrentiel. The road to net zero can sometimes seem daunting. All countries, including Canada, certainly do have a large hill to climb. But the transportation sector is one where we have the wind at our backs, with commercially available technologies that are more fun to drive, that will save Canadians money, and that will eliminate carbon emissions from a key sector. Today's announcement represents another step forward in demonstrating climate leadership that will enable us to meet Canada's climate commitments while positioning this country to succeed economically in the low-carbon world of the future. So thank you very much for those that are joining today, and I will turn it back to Yara.
Minister of Canadian Heritage, Steven Guilbeault, would like to say a few words. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Merci beaucoup, Yara. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je tiens également à souligner que les terres sur lesquelles nous sommes rassemblés font partie du territoire traditionnel non cédé des Kanien'kehá:ka, qui a longtemps servi de lieu de rassemblement et d'échange entre les nations. Il me fait plaisir de me joindre aujourd'hui aux ministres Alghabra et Wilkinson. Puis à Montréal, à l'un des points du circuit électrique. Nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui pour souligner un autre jalon très important dans la lutte au changement climatique. Notre gouvernement devance ses cibles de vente de véhicules zéro émission de 2040 à 2035. Donc, nous allons atteindre cette cible-là de 100% de vente de nouveaux véhicules zéro émission 5 ans plus tôt que prévu. En d'autres mots, toutes les nouvelles voitures qui seront achetées au Canada en 2035 seront des véhicules zéro émission, un objectif que nous atteindrons plus tôt que prévu. Comme l'a indiqué mon collègue, le ministre Wilkinson, le secteur des transports représente le quart des émissions au Canada. Il n'est donc pas étonnant que le Conseil consultatif sur l'action pour le climat, que j'ai co-présidé avant mon entrée en politique, se soit penché sur ce secteur de manière plus particulière. Ses conclusions, la réduction des émissions passe par l'accélération d'un parc automobile zéro émission. L'adoption de véhicules zéro émission à travers le pays fait partie intégrante de la solution, tout comme les incitatifs qui ont été mis en place suite à la publication du rapport dans le budget 2019. C'est le constat auquel arrive un nombre grandissant de juridictions et de pays à travers le monde. Ici au Québec, le gouvernement du Québec a adopté une loi à laquelle j'ai contribué qui fixe les ventes de véhicules zéro émission à 100% pour 2035 également. De plus en plus de Canadiens et de Canadiennes font le choix, individuellement et collectivement,
de voitures zéro émission. Je ne possède pas de voiture personnellement, mais je me suis assuré que ma voiture de fonction soit une voiture 100% électrique. Dans les prochains mois et les prochaines années, nous serons de plus en plus nombreux à opter pour une voiture électrique ou à hydrogène au gouvernement comme ailleurs. En combinant investissement et réglementation pour aider l'industrie de l'automobile et la population canadienne à faire la transition vers un avenir plus vert, nous accélérons l'atteinte de nos cibles en matière de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Cela contribuera à atteindre notre objectif de zéro émission nette d'ici 2050 au bénéfice de notre environnement, de notre économie et de notre santé à toutes et à tous. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. And now I'm pleased to open the floor to your questions.
Thank you. We will now open the floor to questions. Alors, nous passons maintenant à la période de questions. Alors, afin de donner la chance à tous les gens de participer aujourd'hui, veuillez, s'il vous plaît, vous limiter à une question et un suivi. To give everyone a chance to participate, please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. Opérateur, nous sommes prêts pour notre première question. Operator, please proceed with our first question.
Thank you, Allison. Merci. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise hand functionality at the bottom of your Zoom window. Just a reminder that the question period will be reserved for members of the media, and to please state your name and affiliation. Pour poser une question, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonctionnalité « Levez la main » au bas de votre fenêtre Zoom. Un rappel que la période de questions sera réservée aux membres de la presse. Je vous invite à vous identifier et à indiquer le média que vous représentez. The first question is from David Aiken, Global News. À vous la parole. Please go ahead. We seem to be having a slight technical difficulty. David, are you on mute?
That's right. Hi, it's David here. Yeah, you guys have to unmute me. I can't unmute myself. Minister, sorry for your patience, but right now the shot that is being provided to broadcasters is really poor. It's 3 of you in small boxes. So I wondered if the Zoom operator of this call, I'm going to ask a question to Minister Wilkinson. Could I get him in full frame, just Minister Wilkinson? Would that be possible? Nope, now I've got 2 Wilkinsons and a Guilbeault. It's sort of like a poker hand.
If you use the view function in the top right, you can pin whatever window you want, and you'll only see that window.
Right. I'm working remotely, and the editors in our bureau, parliamentary bureau, are recording this, and they can't sort of switch. You have the power to provide full screen, as I've been doing. There we go. Done. That's it. Again, ministers, thank you for your patience. I'm
David, you lost your right to one question. That was your first question.
Anyways, thanks again, folks, and great announcements. Listen, yeah, I'm actually playing a little bit of catch up here, Minister Wilkinson. Yesterday, of course, a lot of us were focused on Minister McKenna and her future, but we missed, I think, a lot of coverage of, I think, an important report from the Natural Resources Department about climate adaptation and where we're at in terms of taking stock of how the country's prepared for a rapidly changing climate. And I just wondered, perhaps, I know it's not your department, but I know you've been really involved with this file. One of the sort of calls to action from that report was about accelerating help for cities and towns. You're right there in the thicket in BC and in a big extreme weather event. Can you give us a sense of what your government is doing on climate adaptation? I know you've been seized with reducing GGs, but we obviously have a problem with extreme weather events. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about climate mitigation, and of course, that's absolutely critical if we are going to stop the rise in global average temperature to something that we believe can be managed. But when we say can be managed, that means it doesn't mean there are no impacts, and clearly that means we have to be thinking about how we adapt to some of the impacts of climate change that we're seeing today and that are already baked into what we're going to see over the next number of years. We did say in the Strengthened Climate Plan that we released in December that we would be developing Canada's first national adaptation strategy. The report that was released yesterday really is a compilation of all of the things that we know with respect to adaptation issues that have been coming to the fore over the course of the last number of years. It sets the foundation for the consultations that we will be working on with provinces, territories, Indigenous peoples, cities, and municipalities to develop a national adaptation strategy that clearly will need to address some of the increasingly frequent bizarre weather events that we are seeing and a whole range of other things. And so, yes, it's a priority. Yes, it is absolutely going to get a lot of attention going forward.
Super. Thank
Follow
you.
up, David?
Yes, thanks very much. This is maybe for Minister Alghabra, sort of on a similar theme. So if I could,
David, it's Steven here in Montreal. May I add something to what Minister Wilkinson said?
I'm happy to hear from you, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Good to hear you as well. And just to add to what Jonathan said, I mean, we are already funding different initiatives across the country. You were referring to Minister McKenna. Well, through many of her program, green infrastructure, for example, we're building just west of Montreal what will be one of the largest urban park in Canada through infrastructure money. And as we know, one of the way to cool the temperature's planet is more green spaces, more tree plantation. So although the climate adaptation plan is still ahead of us, we've already started investing in measures to try and help mitigate the impacts of climate change.
Thank you very much. And so my follow-up was sort of along Minister Alghabra's, I thought I put it to Minister Alghabra along the same lines. The report, you may not have read this, Minister, in detail, but it does talk about how Canada's infrastructure was by and large designed for steady state climate, a northern climate. And to the extent your department is responsible for, airports, interprovincial bridges, some key aspects of infrastructure, I wonder if folks at Transport Canada are seized with the idea of taking a look at existing infrastructure, funding streams, perhaps to provide for key, as airports would be the obvious one, to prepare them for a rapidly changing climate.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Absolutely. As Minister Wilkinson had said, transportation is the second largest source of emission in Canada. It counts almost 25% of our emissions. And if we are serious, and we are, about achieving net zero by 2050, we need to address emissions from transportation sector, and that covers a wide range of modes of transportation. So to answer your question, absolutely. And by the way, I'm doing this in collaboration with Minister Wilkinson, with Minister McKenna for infrastructure. If you recall, the $15 billion that was announced for the infrastructure, for public transportation of infrastructure, included a significant funds for electrifying our buses. So yes, we are working with our ports, with our airports, with our surface, with our aviation sector on finding all ways or methods of reducing our emissions from all sources of emissions. Now, I acknowledge that some technologies and some sectors are more advanced than others. So for example, light duty vehicles and light duty trucks are way more advanced because we have the technologies widely available. But yes, we have a lot of work to do, and we are undertaking that work.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you, merci. La prochaine question est de Jean-Thomas Léveillé de La Presse. La parole est à vous, Monsieur Léveillé.
He's unmuted. Okay, go ahead with your question.
Bonjour, j'aimerais savoir si cette annonce va s'accompagner d'aide aux constructeurs automobiles dans les prochaines années.
Peut-être que je peux offrir un début de réponse, M. Léveillé, puis probablement que Jonathan voudra ajouter quelque chose. On a vu au cours de la dernière année et demie que le gouvernement fédéral s'est entendu avec plusieurs constructeurs de véhicules pour l'installation, la fabrication au Canada de véhicules électriques. C'est vrai pour les voitures, c'est vrai précisément au Québec dans le cas des véhicules plus lourds. On pense aux autobus, véhicules de livraison, notamment avec l'entreprise Autobus Lyon. Alors, il y a un intérêt de plus en plus marqué. Jonathan a fait la liste des pays. On pourrait faire la liste des fabricants d'automobiles qui se dirigent soit vers l'hydrogène, soit vers le tout électrique. encore une annonce aujourd'hui d'une autre grande entreprise, d'un autre grand fabricant de véhicules. Alors, de toute évidence, il y a un intérêt et le gouvernement fédéral sera là pour épauler les compagnies.
Et qu'en est-il des aides aux automobilistes, aux consommateurs, actuellement de 5 000 $? Est-ce que éventuellement vous croyez que ça ne sera plus nécessaire d'aider les consommateurs? Voyez-vous la fin de ces aides-là dans un avenir rapproché ou une fluctuation de cette aide-là?
Tout à l'heure, dans mon allocution, je faisais référence au comité consultatif que j'ai co-présidé, où on avait effectivement recommandé au gouvernement fédéral d'aller de l'avant avec un incitatif, ce qui a été fait dans le budget 2019. Dans la conception de cette aide-là, elle est là, puis le ministre Alghabra en parlait tout à l'heure, cette aide-là, elle est là pour pallier au différentiel de prix entre les véhicules zéro émission et les véhicules à combustion interne. Or, ce qu'on voit, ce qu'on constate, c'est que ce différentiel-là diminue. Alors, il viendra un moment, effectivement, où cet incitatif financier-là n'aura plus sa raison d'être. Ce n'est pas le cas présentement. Alors, c'est certain qu'on va rester à l'affût, mais il viendra effectivement un moment où il n'y aura plus de raison de continuer à offrir un incitatif comme ça, compte tenu de la baisse des prix des véhicules zéro émission.
Et je suis d'accord avec le ministre Guilbeault. Et pour les consommateurs, il y a quelques rapports récemment qui disent que dans la période entre 2025 et 2030, nous pensons que probablement il y a un équilibre entre les coûts pour les véhicules zéro émission et les véhicules qui utilisent le pétrole. Et après ça, bien sûr, il n'y a pas une raison pour avoir une subvention pour les consommateurs, mais on doit travailler maintenant pour augmenter les véhicules et pour assurer que les consommateurs peuvent acheter les véhicules quand ils ont les choix maintenant.
Merci. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Merci beaucoup. The next question is from Stephanie Taylor with the Canadian Press. Stephanie, your line is open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, ministers. I'm not sure who wants to take this one, but your government officials have said you're not on track to even reach the first sales target, which is 10% of all light duty vehicles being electric by 2025. And now we see a more aggressive goal set for 2030. So what is your government going to do in the next couple years to actually even reach its first sales target, let alone this new ambitious one of 100% by 2035?
I'll take a first crack at this. First of all, let me just say our target is ambitious, undoubtedly, but it is a must. It's necessary. And, you know, had I looked at this a year or 2 years ago, I would have even acknowledged that it would have been near impossible. But given the acceleration of the technology, given the acceleration of demands by consumers, given the acceleration of manufacturing by manufacturers, we believe that it's doable. It needs determination, it needs focus, it needs effort, and we are committed to this. So, and by the way, just so you know, there are other factors or other considerations that we are looking into right now. We are looking at expanding the incentive programs for different categories of vehicles, for business consumers, for resale, for used vehicles. So we are looking at other measures that to expand the incentives. We are investing in more charging stations. We are working with manufacturers and other stakeholders on raising awareness for adoption. So yes, it's going to require a comprehensive effort to meet this goal, but we are committed to it, and we know it's ambitious, but we need to get there.
Maybe I can just add to that. I think it's important, Stephanie, to note there are kind of two important pieces to the announcement today. One is the acceleration of the target to 2035 from 2040. But the other is that we're moving from a voluntary target to a mandatory target. And that means that we need to be thinking about regulatory mechanisms as well as incentives. So on the demand side, clearly we need to continue to provide purchase incentives for consumers. We need to continue to build out the electric charging infrastructure so that people have comfort. They can charge their vehicles or fill them up with hydrogen when they are driving longer distances. And that is something that will continue to need investment over the coming number of years until it gets to the point where there's sufficient load on the road that you can make money on a business that is associated with that. But we're going to also be working on the supply side. And part of that is the work we are doing with the Americans on greenhouse gas emission standards, which will be more aggressive and they will drive more accelerated ZEV deployment. But we are also looking at other regulatory mechanisms, and we will be consulting with industry and with the provinces and territories and others. But we will be looking at tools such as a ZEV mandate or others that will ensure that we are going to meet this target. It is a mandatory target.
I can add just one element, please. If I can add just one element to what Ministers Wilkinson and Alghabra just said, the use of regulatory measures like Minister Wilkinson was referring to certainly proven that they work. Certainly in the case of Quebec and BC, we saw following the introduction of such regulatory measures an acceleration from a double to tripling of sales of zero-emission vehicles following the entry into force of such measures. So it's a very global strategy that we're putting forward today that will attack both offer and supply and demand for zero-emission vehicles.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you very much. The market has said outside of this announcement that we're already moving towards zero-emission vehicles. The question is just about timeline. So by speeding up the timeline by 5 years and making it mandatory, how much more money is it going to cost in terms of incentivizing people to at least, purchase one of these vehicles? Because hundreds of millions have already gone into this and we're not close to meeting our 2025 goal. So how much more money is going to have to be spent on making this happen?
I'll also take a shot at this, but first I want to say that look at the image behind Mr. Guilbeault. This was not a stage image where we have a driver pull up behind him and charge their vehicle. This is a great sign of the time. Stephanie, we've already invested in the incentive up to $600 million. And we know that we need to do more. So we are, as I just said earlier, we are looking at expanding and strengthening the incentive program. I don't have a figure for you yet because it's going to depend on the other factors that we include in the program, but we are committed to expanding it and strengthening it. But also I talked about the $8 billion of net zero accelerator that is meant to work with manufacturers and other innovators on accelerating the adoption. We talked as well, we've committed and implemented the 50% reduction of income corporate taxes for corporations that are manufacturing zero emission equipment. So we know that this is important, not only for climate change, but also for our economy. This is how we stir and spur on economic activities. This is how we create jobs. This is the jobs of the future. So it is really important that the government plays a role in accelerating and in supporting such technologies.
Yeah, I would just add to what Omar said. I think, Stephanie, that you have to be cognizant of the fact that countries around the world are moving in this direction. We are not alone in committing to 2035. The bulk in terms of the differential in cost between zero-emission vehicles and internal combustion engines at this point is a matter of volume. And what we're saying is we need to push farther and faster to accelerate the deployment down that experience curve, where we actually end up at a point where the ongoing, the upfront price will be same, and the actual ongoing operating costs are basically about a quarter of an internal combustion engine, that it will put more money back in the pockets of Canadians. So we're going to be working on the strategy, the regulatory tools, alongside the investments that are going to be required. But I would tell you, this is absolutely where the world is going, and it's not just governments. I mean, GM is committed to be 100% zero-emission vehicle producer by 2035 as well. This is where the world is going. This is where the world needs to go. If we are going to meet the obligations that we entered into under Paris, countries around the world are going to need to get on this bus.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question est de Christian Noël de Radio-Canada. Monsieur Noël, avez-vous la parole?
Bonjour, merci beaucoup. Permettez-moi de changer un peu de sujet. Ma question sera pour M. Guilbeault, s'il vous plaît. Si les autres ministres par la suite souhaitent intervenir, merci. M. Guilbeault, j'aimerais revenir sur les célébrations de la Fête du Canada. Certaines communautés ont décidé simplement d'annuler leurs célébrations qui étaient pour la plupart virtuelles de toute façon, mais les annuler quand même. Est-ce que vous appuyez cette façon de faire?
Merci pour la question, M. Noël. Le gouvernement fédéral est responsable de différents types de célébrations, de supporter différents types de célébrations à travers le pays, que ce soit plus récemment la Saint-Jean-Baptiste au Canada, fête acadienne, des fêtes, des commémorations autochtones également à travers un programme du ministère du Patrimoine, mais bien évidemment également la fête du Canada. Ce n'est pas le gouvernement fédéral qui décide ce que les organisations ou parfois même les municipalités décident de faire ou de ne pas faire. Là où le ministère du Patrimoine a une responsabilité qui lui est propre, c'est dans l'organisation de l'événement qui sera télédiffusé demain soir. Cet événement-là est maintenu, mais évidemment, on doit tenir compte de ce qui se passe et nous le faisons déjà depuis plusieurs années. Ceux et celles qui suivent cette question-là voient que nous faisons une place aux artistes autochtones dans le cadre de la Fête du Canada, notamment dans le spectacle, qui est de plus en plus importante, de façon dont nous ne l'avons jamais vu auparavant au pays. D'une part, et d'autre part, le site web, par exemple, pour la Fête du Canada, va tenir compte très, très certainement de la discussion qui a cours présentement au Canada sur cette question-là, offrir de l'information, des références sur la question des pensionnats autochtones, de la réconciliation de façon plus générale. Vous n'êtes pas sans savoir que nous avons fait adopter dans le dernier Parlement la nouvelle journée nationale sur la vérité et la réconciliation, qui était une demande, évidemment, de la Commission sur la vérité et la réconciliation, mais une demande du milieu, à la fois des organisations autochtones, mais non autochtones également. Donc, il va y avoir pour la première fois cette année une journée nationale dédiée à l'importance de se souvenir, de se rappeler de ce chapitre très sombre de l'histoire canadienne.
Suivi.
Merci, M. Guilbeault. Pour mes collègues anglophones, j'aimerais vous demander de répéter cette partie-là. Mais avant aussi, je vais vous poser ma question de suivi, c'est-à-dire que vous n'avez pas répondu à ma question. Je ne vous ai pas demandé ce que le gouvernement faisait. Je vous ai demandé est-ce que vous appuyez les communautés qui, elles, décident de ne pas aller de l'avant avec ces célébrations-là. Pensez-vous que c'est défendable comme position?
Encore une fois, ce n'est pas à nous de décider ce que les organisations...
Je comprends que je ne vous demande pas de décider, je vous demande si vous appuyez.
Je pense que j'ai répondu à votre question, M. Noël. Je répéterai pour vos collègues anglophones. I want to clarify that the Government of Canada, more particularly the Ministry of Canadian Heritage, has two responsibilities when it comes to celebration and commemorations in Canada. We support celebrations like Canada Day, obviously, but also Saint Jean-Baptiste, the National Acadian celebration, but also Indigenous commemoration and celebration through different programs at the Ministry of Canadian Heritage. We are responsible for the organization of the Canada Day show, which will be virtual this year for second year in a row, obviously. And we think that this is, and we have started using it as an important moment for dialogue and conversation. We are featuring Indigenous artists and musicians in ways we've never seen before for a Canada Day event like that. And I believe, and our government believes, that Canada Day can be a moment for dialogue and for better understanding. And then organizations or municipalities are free to decide what they want to do. It's not for us to decide for them or to judge what they decide to do.
Merci. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from CTV, but I unfortunately do not have a name. Can you please identify yourself?
Hi, can you hear me? It's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. Is this working?
Hi, Annie. This is working. Please go ahead, Annie.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I just sort of wanted to follow up on what my colleague was asking about Canada Day. there are some people who are suggesting that instead of spending money on things like fireworks, which is something that Canadian Heritage pays for on Parliament Hill, that money should instead be donated to different Indigenous groups. I'm wondering what you think of that idea and whether you think it's appropriate to continue to have fireworks and large Canada Day celebrations like we normally would in years future.
Well, I'd like to answer the first part of your question. If we look at support from the federal government for Indigenous organizations, let me give you a very clear example. When we come into power in 2015, the federal government invests $5 million for Indigenous languages, for all Indigenous languages across this country. This year, that amount was almost 12 times what it was in 2015. So what the previous government was providing in terms of support. So around $60 million. Next year, it's going to go to almost $120 million. So 24 times what the support was from the previous government. Speak to any Indigenous person in Canada, they will tell you that language is culture. There can be no culture without languages. So we've made significant efforts and to support Indigenous organizations. In fact, this year, for the first time ever, we were able to support every single language proposal we got from Inuits. It's the first time ever. We're not there yet with Métis and First Nations, and we're certainly working on that. So this is very clear support for Indigenous organization. I was talking a little bit earlier about the new National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Budget 2021 provides support for organizations across the country who want to organize events, commemorations, learning workshops, history lessons about truth and reconciliation in this country. So the federal government is supporting through various programs a number of initiatives on this very issue.
My next question, if you wouldn't mind, please answering it in both French and English, that would be greatly appreciated. You mentioned that there's going to be a lot more Indigenous programming reflecting the unique culture of Indigenous people on this Canada Day. I'm wondering if you can elaborate a bit more on that. And also, do you believe that there should be a minute of silence at the beginning of the celebration this year, both, people who are celebrating in Ottawa and across the country? Do you believe that would be appropriate this year?
So in terms of, we would be happy to provide you with a list of programs, organizations, events that feature Indigenous artists as part of Canada Day. I don't have that with me just now, but we can certainly follow up with you on that. As you know, the Canadian flag is flying half-mast on all of government buildings since the discovery of the children in Kamloops. The bodies of the children and remains, and we have decided to keep the flags half-mast until further notice, in solidarity with Indigenous peoples across the country. Je pense que vous vouliez que je répète cette réponse, pardon, en français. Donc, la question était est-ce que j'ai la liste des projets autochtones ou encore des artistes autochtones font partie des célébrations de la Fête du Canada à travers le pays? Je ne l'ai pas avec moi présentement, mais on peut certainement vous fournir cette liste. Et sur la deuxième partie de la question, est-ce qu'il devrait y avoir une minute de silence? Je précisais que les drapeaux sur tous les édifices du gouvernement fédéral sont à mi-mât depuis la découverte des cadavres des enfants à Kamloops, et ils le resteront jusqu'à nouvel ordre en solidarité et avec les communautés affectées partout au pays, les peuples autochtones affectés partout au pays.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you, merci. The next question is from Charlie Pinkerton with iPolitics. Please go ahead.
Hey there, am I being heard correctly?
Yep.
Great, okay. Well, good morning, and well, morning to some, afternoon to others. My questions are going to be directed to Minister Alghabra. Minister, we know that the Arrive Can app is going to be what Canadians use to prove their vaccination status when double dose travelers are allowed, starting in a week's time, to skip the hotel and 14-day quarantines. But I'm hoping you can tell us a bit more today about what the latest is with the longer term solution for a proof of vaccination document that's recognized by multiple countries to allow travel. Specifically, where are these conversations at right now? Which countries exactly is Canada most concerned with aligning itself with in terms of having a mutually recognized document to allow each other's citizens to resume traveling to one another's countries? And when is the government pushing to reach an agreement with its international allies on this type of system?
Thank you, Charlie, for the question. Let me just say I'm really looking forward to July 5th, where fully vaccinated travelers will be able to avoid government-approved accommodation and reduce quarantine. This is great news for all those who are fully vaccinated and looking to come back for a visit, to visit their families and see loved ones. It's a bit windy here. I hope you can hear me. Arrive Can app is going to be part of the solution, and I know you called it as an interim option. Arrive Can app might still be used even in phase 2. So Arrive Can app now is the tool for travelers to upload their certification, where it uses artificial intelligence to verify the certificate that the traveler is carrying. Right now, by the way, you might be interested in knowing that Arrive Can is the most popular app in Canada, and this is a sign that a lot of travelers are downloading it, and that's great. As far as the second phase or the next step in providing a vaccine certification proof, we are working with the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. This is the international organization where it sets standards for civil aviation, and it's working, and it has already issued a standard for vaccine certification. We are also working with our partners at the G7 in ensuring that we have a unified standard, a coordinated plan for travelers. So people who are vaccinated in other countries can receive a verifiable certificate and be verified here in Canada, and the reverse will be true. So that work is ongoing, but we know that we're going to have, as of July 5th, a tool for all travelers, including Canadians and permanent residents who are eligible to enter Canada, so they can upload and verify their vaccine certificate.
Follow up?
Okay, thanks, Minister, for the rather complete answer. I will just ask if you could clarify when the government is pushing for an agreement with international partners for that phase 2. But as for my next question, there was some pushback, including from MPs in your own party, after its announcement about the changes on July 5th, that Americans, fully vaccinated Americans like Canadians, did not qualify. Did COVID vaccine uptake in the US, and specifically how it has stagnated, especially in some or certain parts of the country, factor into this decision to leave Americans out this time around? And then looking ahead to July 21st, which is really, I see as the next significant date on the minds of Canadians and Americans who might want to travel to one another's countries, given that that is the date when the border agreement would either be renewed or expire. Would this point, vaccine uptake and coverage in the United States, impact your government's decision about what it does with the agreement at that time?
Charlie, thank you for the question, and I really recognize and acknowledge the anxiety and desire on many Canadians who want to travel. And believe me, we all want to reopen travel fully when it's safe. But what we committed to Canadians is that we do everything we can to protect their health and safety. And what we've outlined over the last few weeks is that as we are, recognizing and celebrating the rates of vaccination here in Canada, we are going to start adjusting our travel measures, but we need to do it responsibly, thoughtfully, and in a phased approach to ensure that we are careful as we open up travel and ease restrictions. Look, we've seen it in other countries. We've seen in other countries where sometimes if you get ahead of yourself, that you end up having to readjust these measures and roll back. And we never want to see that. We never want to see ourselves getting too far ahead. So our phase one is opened up or adjusted quarantine measures for eligible travelers. I know there will be phase two, and phase two is not going to be months from now. It's going to be weeks from now. I'm looking forward to the announcement. We will be announcing it when we reach the threshold. I'm in discussions with Minister Haidu, with Minister Blair, with Dr. Theresa Tam and our officials of public health and the provinces about when phase two and when phase three and what each phases will entail. So stay tuned for that. As for your question on July 21st, it's really too early for me to tell you. We are obviously engaged with our friends in the United States on when would be the right time, when it would be safe to open the border. But these discussions are ongoing. That will depend on data, depend on what the Americans want, it depends on what our public health advice is.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Alors, nous avons le temps pour une dernière question. Operator, last question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from David Booth for Post Media. Please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. The government gave, I think it was $295 million to Ford to refurbish the plant in Oakville for electric power. The current subsidies stop at cars that start at below $45,000, which is basically compact sized cars, which is a diminishing market in Canada. The big news out of Ford and other domestic companies, which you've mentioned, are electric pickups that are much more expensive even to start than the $45,000. Are we looking at getting those incentives broadened so those vehicles can be included in the incentives, because they will grow the market far quicker than a compact EV?
Yes, thank you for the question. And as I said earlier, we are currently looking at expanding and strengthening the incentive program. We're looking at the category of vehicles. We're looking at used vehicles. We're looking at business fleet. So we are looking at other measures to include in the incentive program, because we know we need to be, again, more ambitious. We need to be more aggressive in accelerating the adoption of zero-emission vehicles.
Thank you.
Follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This concludes today's event. Ceci conclut l'événement d'aujourd'hui. Merci.
Thank you.
Merci.